YouTube scored a record 17 million global viewers for its Chief Chargers live stream. Bending Spoons is buying Vimeo for 1.4 billion, and can MTV be resuscitated? Listen on.
Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Inside the Stream. This is Will Richmond from Video News, and that was Colin Dixon there, of course, at the beginning. From End Screen Media. Hey Colin, how is everything this week?
Well, it's going great, Will, although we have just seen some breaking news. We're probably not going to dive into it in the podcast, but we should definitely mention it. We've just read in the Wall Street Journal that Paramount Skydance has barely finished their merger, but apparently they're preparing a bid for Warner Brothers Discovery. Will, that would be a big deal because it's way bigger than the previous. It will be way bigger than the previous deal, right?
Well, it also put two studios under the same ownership umbrella, which we don't know what a regulator would have to say about that. But more to the point, as you just said, is that Paramount Skydance deal just got done. Now they're talking about another far bigger deal. What could go wrong, right?
What could go wrong? You know, a lifetime ago, I worked for Larry Ellison, and I once saw him give a speech where he talked about his battle with Sybase, and that every time Oracle announced a new product, Sybase would buy a new company, and that by the time they got to fight Sybase, it was dead because it couldn't integrate it all. I wonder if his son should listen maybe back to that presentation here. You keep buying companies and you don't take time to integrate them properly. You know, it probably isn't a good outcome. But anyway, we're going to do a bit of a round the horn today because there's been a bunch of things happening in the industry, right?
Exactly. So we're going to start with the NFL game on YouTube, streamed on YouTube last Friday from Brazil. This was the Kansas City Chiefs and Los Angeles Chargers game. And YouTube reported out on the attendance, the streaming viewership for that game. This feels like this, based on what we can tell, is a total one-off. YouTube paid reportedly around $100 million just to be able to have the exclusive global rights to broadcast this particular NFL game from Brazil. And the YouTube post on this, which, by the way, I just have to compliment whoever wrote this post, because I think the first sentence of this post is one of the best first sentences I've seen in a long time, which is, I'm just going to read it. This past Friday, the gridiron and the YouTube community collided to make history. That's a first-class sentence, if ever there was one, in my view. But in any event,
let's just hope it wasn't written by Gemini, Will.
Yeah, maybe it was written by Gemini. That would be scary. But yeah, who knows? In any event, to the substance, YouTube said that the global audience was 17.3 million, which they said was a new record for live streaming, for a live event on YouTube. That caught both of our attention, actually, because it was lower than we would have thought, and it harkened us back to the famous Felix Baumgartner live event, which was actually back, hard to believe, 13 years ago. 2012 drew 8 million live audience. Here we are now, 13 years later, 17.3 million. We were both caught a little surprised by that. We would have thought it would have been beaten it a long, long time ago. Actually, it probably was beaten, but that 17.3 million seemed a little low for us, relatively speaking. Anyway, 17.3 average minute audience, 16.2 million average minute audience in the U.S., and 1.1 million outside the U.S. YouTube said that people tuned in from over 230 countries and territories around the globe, and that's YouTube data. So this was, I missed this, unfortunately. I wasn't able to watch this, Colin. You didn't see it either, though, did you?
I didn't, and I'm kind of surprised because I would have thought YouTube would have prompted me, either Google TV or YouTube would have prompted me that this was going on. Because I was certainly popped over there to take a look and see what was happening.
Yeah, I agree. I'm on YouTube a fair amount myself, and I never saw a prompt for it either, unless it was a prompt that was so subtle that I went by it. But I didn't see any promotion in my travels on YouTube either. And yet, obviously, they got 17.3 million, a record for them for a live stream. So they did something right in terms of promoting it. Maybe it was more targeted promotion. I don't know. Who knows what it was? But in any event, I think the key takeaway here is that YouTube's ability to demonstrate to itself that it can drive a huge live audience for an NFL game will only whet their appetite for obtaining the rights to more games in the future. Now, of course, the main NFL package is locked up for many years to go, but the NFL has shown a real aptitude for slicing and dicing rights to particular games. And I would say that to the extent that they can carve up some games rights that YouTube would be interested in, I would think they're only going to become more so as we go forward. The NFL is also, as I'm sure you know, Colin, and listeners know also, has been making a push to have more games played outside of the U.S. So that opens up the potential for some type of an international package, which YouTube would be particularly well suited to bid for. Netflix also, for that matter, would be well suited to bid for. Those are no doubt the two biggest global players in streaming. So we may see some face-offs going forward for an international NFL package between YouTube and Netflix. What do you think?
I think that could well be the case, Will. Yeah. I mean, generally, NFL seems to be off to a pretty good start this season. I was looking at numbers from NBCU this morning that showed that there was a total audience for their Sunday night football first game of the season, which was a cracker, actually, between the Bills and Baltimore. Which really, the Bills came back pretty spectacularly in that game and shocked Baltimore. That was a pretty good audience too. 26.5 million total audience delivery according to NBCU. 4 million of those on Peacock, a total of 5 million streaming. So I guess some people were using other NBCU platforms to stream the other balance of 1 million. So that's pretty good. And of course, we should always remember when we're quoting those numbers of streaming through Peacock, we should properly include the ones that we're streaming on the virtual MVPDs if you want to get a real idea of scale of streaming. So that 4 million is likely double that when you include the virtual MVPDs. But NFL off to a good start this season.
Yeah, let's move on to the next one.
Indeed, and this story might have floated by and you not caught it. It was announced this week that a company called Bending Spoons is buying Vimeo. They've put a 1.38 billion bid in, which has been accepted by the Vimeo's board. Vimeo, of course, is a customer-facing video platform that is used by many small providers and business customers to deliver video experiences to whoever they would like. Now, Bending Spoons, that name may be familiar to you because it's come up in our space already once before towards the end of last year when Bending Spoons announced that they were buying Brightcove. Now, Brightcove is a video platform a little bit different to Vimeo. It's more focused on SVOD providers and people looking to launch their own services. So it has many of the tools that you would need to be able to do that. As I say, Vimeo is more of a sort of end user experience built in. So you watch through the Vimeo client when you're using Vimeo. That's typically the difference there. But anyway, this Bending Spoons purchased Brightcove, and this company is based in Milan, Italy. And the reason it's doing this, it's bought a whole bunch of businesses that are sort of customer facing, more like Vimeo, things like Evernote, Meetup, and StreamYard, Splice, and WeTransfer. They have a sort of customer facing part. And Bending Spoons has a service infrastructure. And so basically its modus operandi is to buy these companies, port their solution over to Bending Spoon's service infrastructure, and then continue to run them as standalone businesses. So the idea here, I guess, is to make the back end much more efficient. So that's exactly what they did with Bright Cove. And they purchased Bright Cove. They laid off a whole bunch of the engineering staff. I think there's very few engineers left in the US in Bright Cove now. I think that's all done in Italy. And if you're a Vimeo engineer, I would be polishing my resume, because I think that's almost certainly going to happen here. And the purchase of Bright Cove, I've been actually doing a little bit of research here, Will. And quite a lot of people have been leaving Bright Cove since that purchase. So I've spoken to a couple of companies. So I don't know how happy they are with Bending Spoon's purchase of Bright Cove. I'm still doing my research there, so I don't want to say too much. But the good news is, if you are a video provider and you are using Vimeo or you're using Bright Cove, there's still several really good options for you to look to. So Zype is a great option. That's a video platform that many people really enjoy using. And a new one from Cineverse, Matchpoint, has recently launched. Matchpoint is being used by Cineverse to run its streaming service, and you can now use Matchpoint to run yours as well. So there were plenty of options. So if you're a bit nervous about this purchase by Vimeo and you want to graduate to a more full-featured video platform, you should check those out. But anyway, yeah, if you're an engineer at Vimeo, you're probably looking at getting a new job in the next year.
Well, let's move on to the next story, Colin, which is another thing that caught us a little bit by surprise this week, reading in the Wall Street Journal that MTV, which of course was a staple, cultural staple back in the day, and is now, again, part of Paramount's Skydance, which we just talked about a moment ago, that apparently the Paramount Skydance team is now trying to figure out how they might make MTV culturally relevant again, and that they're sort of brainstorming some different ideas. And you and I read this article, and I think we both sort of groaned a little bit, like, really? Really? MTV? Hasn't the world moved on from MTV? And not just MTV, but cord cutting, of course, in general, has diminished the pay TV audience. So we were both a little bit taken aback by that. Of course, we never want to say never in this business or in the world, because you never know how things are going to turn out. But it does seem like an uphill slog to figure out how to mine more value out of MTV. The digital music landscape, what has occurred, long after MTV's heyday, I think would present some pretty significant barriers for MTV to restore its place to glory. I think about Spotify, Vivo, Apple, well, maybe not Apple Music, but, YouTube. There's so many big players now in the music space that trying to resuscitate an old brand like MTV, again, never say never, but wouldn't necessarily bet on it either. What do you think?
Absolutely not, Will. I mean, this is kind of crazy. I think there really isn't much to be done with MTV. As you say, its two core, its founding purpose, which was music television, has been completely subsumed by much more flexible platforms like Vivo on YouTube TV, on YouTube Music. And YouTube Music itself, as you mentioned, has been completely subsumed. MTV, of course, moved pretty heavily into reality TV. And that's really everywhere. Who needs MTV for that? They've got, I suppose, Big Brother was their big brand, but has that hit the headlines at any time in the recent past? I don't think so. It's all Love Island and Bachelor stuff and all of that nonsense. I don't really see that there's a way back for MTV. It doesn't hold any particular value for today's generation that might be interested in it. And I don't really see that that there's going to be any point in trying to sell it to them or the people that were interested in it, who have also moved on in their life from probably the type of content that it was best known for. So, no, I don't see any particular value there, Will.
So if Paramount Skydance ends up acquiring Warner Brothers Discovery, and we're, of course, now way down the list of ifs, then maybe, and if Paramount does pursue the same strategy that Warner Brothers Discovery is doing, which is sectioning off the cable networks, then maybe MTV ends up with Discovery and Honey Boo Boo.
What a prize.
And the whole cable dial ends up being thrown into one big company.
Indeed. Yeah.
Never say
never. Never say never. It's interesting that this is, to sort of think back, the Paramount Skydance are putting this bid in before the split, the proposed split of Warner Brothers Discovery into two companies. I think I was actually expecting somebody to move in on the companies when they split, which I think makes a lot more sense, because then you have very clearly defined businesses in very clearly defined trajectories, Will, and you wouldn't waste your time on one side versus the other, right? If your particular interest was one or the other. But then again, they haven't split into a cable side and a streaming side, so maybe taking the whole thing and splitting the whole thing is on the agenda. But who knows? They could do anything there.
Who knows? Okay, let's go on to our final story of the day, which you have.
I do, and this if we think back to CES, one of the things that Google promised is that they were going to integrate Gemini into Google TV and bring Gemini-like functionality to the television. Well, it's taken a long time, but it's finally happened that the first TVs with Gemini built in have shipped. It was announced this week that TCL is now shipping new QM9K smart TVs with Google Gemini built in. Now, this is not the first time that AI has been shipped in a TV by any amount. AI is typically used by many TVs to enhance the video quality. So there's a lot of interpolation going on when things are up-resed to 4K from lower resolutions. And a lot of that is assisted by AI. But I think this is the first time we actually have a full Gen AI Gemini built into the thing. It's accompanied by far-field microphones. So what that means is you can basically shout at the TV or talk to the TV from across the room, which is kind of essential. Google hopes that this will encourage people to leave TVs on all the time. And to that end, these TVs also have built-in sensors which can tell when somebody's actually in the room in front of the TV and capable of seeing the TV. So it will come on, and that's one of the modes that apparently Gemini is going to assist with. It's going to put information on the television, basically recognize who's standing in the room and put information relevant to that person on the TV when it automatically turns on. So that's one way it's going to be used. Another way it's going to be used is to enhance recommendations and search and interaction across across all of the services that are on there. So it should allegedly make the voice searches more conversational. So you'll be able to say things like, show me a video that explains the solar system to a third grader. And Gemini will be able to pluck a video from YouTube's extensive library that's appropriate for a third grader and play it. So that's the type of thing that they're talking about. Also, hopefully, it will be much more conversational, that you will be able to actually have continuing conversations. So, maybe it spits one of those videos out, and then you can say, no, I'd rather see one that's in black and white, or whatever. Give it refinements on that to better match what you're looking for. So I haven't seen this yet. It hasn't. I do have a Google device. It hasn't rolled out to that device. I've got the Google TV on Chromecast. It hasn't rolled out to that device yet. So I can't tell you how well it works. I don't know, Will. Does this make you want to run out and buy a TCL TV because it's got Google Gemini built in?
What it makes me want to do is ask the same rhetorical question I asked earlier. What could go wrong? I mean, if you were ever worried about Big Brother, I would say this is the time to elevate those concerns. TV and AI, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to sound like a Luddite here, but I do think that it opens up a whole new horizon of what happens in the living room when you have AI on your TV. But it could be very helpful, as you said. It could be very helpful, but it feels like it could veer off into all kinds of unintended directions also.
It could, but I want to reassure people, first of all, about how it's sensing the person in front of the TV. It's not using a camera. There's not a camera built into this, so it's not going to be peeking on you while you're watching your TV. It's just a different type of sensor that's figuring out if somebody's in front of the television. So that's one thing. However, all of the usual stuff, if you leave this TV on all the time, all of the usual stuff that you would be sensitive with, given if you're using one of these assistants, apply here. I assume that it is listening for an on word before it sends up to the cloud, but of course we're completely trusting these guys that that's actually what they're doing. I don't know. One thing it does do, though, is I'm hoping that these TVs will do a better job in helping people find stuff. Things are pretty complicated in CTV land these days, Will, and sometimes it's very difficult in locating where a particular show is quickly, and this might help do that. It could do that in two ways. One, if it knows it's you standing in front of the TV and it knows that you're watching Elspeth on Paramount Plus and there's a new episode, it surfaces that as soon as the TV comes on so that you can just go, oh, play that, and away you go. That would be really, really useful. So hopefully it's going to be doing that type of thing going forward. If it does, it will make a positive contribution, I think, to making TV watching simpler.
Or conversely, you're sitting there watching your TV and casually picking your nose, and the AI microphone picks up that noise subtly and says, Colin, we notice your finger is in your nose again. Can you please remove it? Or you're sitting on your couch. Or you
see an ad for nasal spray or something.
Exactly.
Which is just as likely.
You see an ad for nasal spray, or you're sitting there eating your nachos and drinking a beer, and the AI hears you doing that and chimes in, Colin, that's not appropriate for the diet that you're on. Must I remind you of this? No nachos and nothing other than light beer for you.
Maybe you should take that Google Watch off before you start using the TV. Maybe you're right.
What could go wrong? What could go wrong, Colin?
Nothing at all. But now we're off in intense speculation land, Will. So maybe we should leave it for this week.
I think that's a fair point. Okay, we covered a bunch of ground. And certainly before next week's podcast, we're going to be seeing how this whole Paramount Skydance potential acquisition of Warner Brothers Discovery plays out, because that would be pretty big news, right?
It certainly would, and maybe that is indeed something that we'll return to next week when maybe some more details are available.
Fair enough. Okay, good chatting, Colin. Thanks everyone for listening in this week, and of course we'll see you all again next week. Inside the Stream is a production of In-Screen Media and Video News, all rights reserved.